Hello, and welcome back to the Starfather path for Hearts of Iron 4. This is episode 5, and to remind you what happened last time, we formed the transcendental government of the Quagatai. We've declared war on Lombet, but we're having issues actually breaking into this area. Though they finally exhausted themselves, I've encircled them several times, they've failed some naval invasions and are pretty weak. And last but not least, we finished the guide's journey on Griffonia, and we're moving on to Zebrica, and there's some tears appearing for obvious reasons considering what happened last time around. So we continue with that. The teacher's welcome. Once again, the guide stood in front of the Starfather's personal laboratory. Her arrival had heralded minor celebrations, but instead she chose to head directly to see her teacher. After several moments' hesitation, she composed herself and knocked on the door. Shortly afterwards it opened, and the guide was met with another warm smile. My, it has been a while, my dearest guide. Do come in, you must be weary. Hiram ushered her in. Unlike last time she had seen him, he was no longer covered in muck or filth, and instead appeared much more dignified. The way he carried himself, it almost seemed like he was more than just Hiram, more than the teacher she knew. The lab had changed too. It now seemed much more organized and less hazardous than before. There was even a small resting area with some drinks on a nearby table. Hiram stopped in front of said table and picked up a cup of hot cocoa, then offered it to the guide. I take it that your expeditions were successful. Yes, of course, I got everything you asked for. The guide joined him at the resting area and accepted the drink. As she sat down, the memories of all the hardships she had endured to get the Starfather's ingredients resurfaced. She sipped at the drink. Elishat and Zethro would have loved to be here. Without looking up from the cup, she gathered her courage and prepared to speak her mind. Teacher, may I ask you something? Oh no, she actually going to ask him about, like, maybe the griffins aren't so bad? This is a bad idea. I don't think he'll take that very well. Also, she's writing a letter to him in the middle of her meeting with him. Whatever. You just sat down at the table and saw this letter. Starfather's promise. Hiram chuckled, setting his own cup down and giving the guide his full attention. You can ask me anything after all you've done so much for me. It's only fair that I repay you however I can. There was a brief pause before she began. As you're aware, there are a lot of good equines who have lost their lives for our beliefs, said the guide with the barest hint of nervousness. And we will no doubt lose many more before the godhead is restored. Can you promise me that all of those equine sacrifices will be worth it? That every equine who falls in the name of the Ascendancy will be remembered for what they accomplished when we succeed? Why, of course they are and will be. This is unbecoming of you, my guide. Surely, as my most trusted disciple, you will have the most faith in our cause. Well, I guess questioning him on that isn't as severe, but it's kind of a step in the right direction. Kind of. I don't know. Not really, honestly. So now the guide has found a crypto-avian to bring on her journeys with her. This can only end well. She saved her from execution, but I don't think she's planning on being nice to her. So we've made a few more encirclements, and I'm going to try to research rocket technology and make some decent tanks. I guess we'll just go for super heavy tanks. Why not? In Equestria War specifically, there are a lot of advanced models of them, so they remain relevant even when modern tanks become a thing. And an outside perspective. Where are we going anyways? We passed the Naharis hours ago. The Pegasus complained as she unenthusiastically followed the guide. She stopped and waved her hoof around to exaggerate her frustration. You know that I'm not restrained, right? I could just fly away. And with lightning fast reflexes, the guide whipped around and brought her knife up to the Pegasus' throat. Then go, try to fly, see how far you get before this is buried into you, heretic. Need to remind you that I did not have to save you back there. The guide could see fear in the Pegasus' eyes for a moment. Said Pegasus quickly recovered her composure, then brazenly pushed the guide's blade away. Whatever, it's not like I have anywhere to go, especially since you lunatics murdered my host family and seized the ports. Their spirits were likely corrupted by Zalmar. Fortunately, they will be reincarnated into proper equines of bronze and iron, or equines of silver if they are lucky. Very well, student, we are going into the deserts of Zarantia to kill a Tazzle worm. Oh, the worms and the worm queen. Yeah, that's Great stuff. And they got the acid gland of Zerantian Tatzelworm to add to the giant stockpile of ingredients. Storm colors brew. Decreases bad weather penalty. Makes us fight better in the cold, which is also good because it's so hot here that all of our troops are used to fighting in the heat. When we move elsewhere, we'll need that ability to get used to the cold. The faithless student. You survived and have grown stronger as a result of this trial. The road to escaping your poisonous belief in harmony is long, but you will thank me in the end. The guide and the student continued traveling through the Zerantian desert. They made some brief stops in various Imazib settlements to resupply, but didn't stay long as not to attract too much attention. The guide held an organ for one of their holy creatures after all. Onwards they went, with their next stop being somewhere in one of the inhospitable places in the world, Azir. The two of them walked for some time before the student spoke up again. You're wrong, you know. Harmony isn't a poison. The guide withdrew another pair of chilling potions from her pouch and offered one to the student. You believe that because you lack faith. I have plenty of faith, scowled the student as she accepted the potion. Faith in the princess, faith in harmony, faith that good will always triumph over evil in the end. Believe me, your ascendancy is the most evil, twisted faith I've ever heard of. It won't last forever. That is where you are mistaken, my student. The equestrians and their alicorns may be fragments of the godhead, but that is all they are. Fragments, unrefined and unshaped. Once they have the opportunity to accept the blessed truth that the ascendancy provides, they'll gladly join us in our ultimate goal to restore the godhead. I feel like this isn't gonna end well. Maybe we'll just lose this war and then nothing bad will ever happen and we'll be defeated by the nice old dear person. They'll save the world from us. We're here, the guide said as she set her bags down onto the sand. The student looked around, confused. All she saw in every direction was sand, sand, and more sand. Are you okay? Have you been drinking enough water? The guide waved a hoof dismissively. It's hard to describe. We will have to wait for this unbound magic to become apparent, so we might as well make camp here. Over the next several hours, the two travelers sat patiently, waiting for something to happen. The student first noticed that something was amiss when she felt her spine tingle. Out of the corner of her eye, she kept spotting black rocks and broken pillars in the distance. Whenever she tried to focus her eyes on them, they vanished. She truly began to feel unsettled when the very air itself seemed to flicker in front of her. Somewhere deep in her mind, she knew that this place was not safe. Her senses were screaming at her to leave immediately, but she did not know why. If the guide was also being affected by this place, she didn't show it. The guide stood up and walked up to one of the flickering anomalies, then opened a small vial in front of it. She whispered something, then a small part of the odd phenomenon seemed to be drawn into the vial. The guide then sealed it and turned to the student, beckoning her to follow. We have what we came here for. Let's go. I don't know if that's a reference to anything else. Maybe in the future there'll be a path that explains the magic mirage pillar place more, and looming dread. Ponies spoke to one another in agitated and nervous voices, and every conversation seemed to end like they might never see tomorrow. Some even looked like they were prepared to flee at a moment's notice. Even the guide seemed somewhat off-put by this. As she purchased some supplies from the market square, she inquired about the odd behavior of the ponies around her. I'm surprised you don't know, said the sales pony in a hushed tone. The terror up north has consumed the media, the minds of every pony here. What terror? Inquired the guide with concerned curiosity. The sales pony shuddered briefly. They call it the Ascendancy, a truly frightening cult. It's proclaimed death and destruction upon all those who oppose it. Any who resist their rules suffer a cruel and painful demise. Already many have fallen to them, and every pony here is wondering if we'll be the next. That's ridiculous. The guide looked appalled. The Starfather has promised us salvation, and only if we listen and adhere to his principles will we achieve transcendence. Those who don't are simply corrupted by it. Zalmar. Horror seemed to overcome the sales pony as he listened to her. You're one of them. What are you? A scout for their army? Please, leave us be. Just go. She stood, shocked, processing the sales pony's extreme reaction. The student then spoke up from behind her. Now do you understand what your ascendancy does to innocent ponies they've yet to conquer? The guide shook her head, both to dismiss the student's words and to clear her own thoughts. No, it is they who don't understand. Zalmar's influence has poisoned their minds, and yours. The student groaned again in defeat. There's no getting through to issue, is there? And thus their journey continued. Great. Yeah, our divisions are kind of bad though. I don't know why I've kept them so terrible. We have basically infinite supplies. I think I can put mechanized in all of my divisions, at least some. Yeah, we can actually put 2 mechanized in all the divisions. We'll add those and some extra artillery, and then I think that should be good, and we will just let our units sit around for a little while and get their new equipment. Tomb raiding. This isn't the first time the guide has tomb raided. Great, more spooky ruins. What are we looking for exactly? The Tablet of Asimtar, or Samtar, I don't know. Said to hold traces of alchemical reagents used in the process of creating the ancient Asterian god kings. The guide and the student were both knee-deep in a partially collapsed tomb somewhere in the Asterian wilderness. For hours they pilfered through coffins and various containers in search of said mythical tablet. I still don't get why your star dad needs all these things, the student complained as she heft another rock off an obstructed coffin. Couldn't he just have bought some substitute ingredients from the grocery store? The guide dusted off a vase to examine it for clues. If it was that simple, we wouldn't be out here. Yeah, that's true. They found the tablet, and we slowly march forward. I think we got the supplies, so we can start moving again. How many lives is it worth your goal? Asked the student, breaking the long silence between the 2 equines as they traveled south by the Trotafe River. As many as it takes. What about your friends? What if they have to die too? Will it still be worth it in the end? The guide gritted her teeth, images of Elishat and Zathra flashing through her mind. Yes, she said firmly. The student pressed further, determined to get a reaction out of the guide. And once you stand with an empty world broken by your hooves, what then? How many creatures have to be wiped out? Histories erased, cities destroyed, families torn apart. Zalmar's influence runs deep in the world. You talk about some evil god bringing ruin to the world, but everyone everywhere is afraid of you bringing ruin to them. Maybe you're being influenced yourself. The 2 of them had stopped. The breeze of the desert wind was now the only audible thing they could hear. Reaching for her blade, the guide contemplated whether or not ending the life of this insolent student was worth defying the guidance. After a moment, she composed herself and instead responded to the student. If we do not make these sacrifices, then our souls will be lost forever. The student screamed in exasperation. Why are you so I don't even have words. You're becoming hysterical. Before the student could speak any further, the guide turned and threw a small vial at her, shattered once it smashed into her face, causing the powdery contents to billow out around her. Almost immediately, the student became woozy and then passed out shortly afterwards. The guide sighed, then reached down to pick up the unconscious Pegasus, and thus their journey continued. This is all very unfortunate. Why can't this deer be strong enough to oppose us? As for our military exploits, we've moved almost all of our divisions to attack the Kingdom of Hindia. There's no point in attacking Lambet, that they'll capitulate with their overlord, so we'll just ignore them. They have more divisions than their overlord too, so attacking them is just a pain. We also can now design a super heavy tank, which I think that'll be a good idea to get one in production. We'll need some crazy stuff to invade Griffonia though. The Empire is going to be very strong. That's not going to be a fun war, huh? Okay, we need a lot more chromium and steel though to facilitate this super heavy tank production. We have massive amounts of crystals and Carthage though, so we can just transmute the crystals into all of the materials that we need. Another hint for how to make a potion. 3 fire-related ingredients. This one can't be too difficult. Wow, first try. The Potion of True Fire. Plus 10% soft attack and breakthrough. That's pretty decent, I would say. I'll take minus 5 HP. Snooping. The guide's eyes shut open, but she did not lift her head just yet. She had heard a faint noise in the campsite, a rustling of sorts. She couldn't see what it was from where her head was pointed, but if it was something hostile, then it would be unwise to alert it. She reached for her knife with care not to make any sudden movements. Just as she grasped it, she heard the noise once more, the rustling of pages. The guide bolted upright. She saw her pouch open, and not too far away was the student who seemed to panic at the guide's sudden movement. She dropped a small book onto the ground in her attempt to hide it. A purple book with the Ascendancy's logo emblazoned on it. The guide's journal. Yeah, this journal has been the event picture for many events, but this event is maybe the most accurate time to use the picture. Tears formed in the student's eyes as she struggled to free herself yourself. Immediately, the guide tackled the student to the ground, blade pressed against her throat. What did you think you were doing, you insolent wretch? Tears formed in the student's eyes as she struggled to free herself. You have a picture of a griffin and a pony in there. Fury seemed to overcome the guide. She dug her blade in slightly enough to draw a small amount of blood. Her voice was filled with venom. I suggest you choose your next words very carefully. Did you see anything in my journal? The student whimpered and closed her eyes. Answer me, demanded the guide. I saw only a zebra struggling with her faith. The guide's head pounded. Her mind and body were screaming at her to slaughter the heretic here and now, yet the guidance still held her back, as if the young mare in front of her was the single most important thing that it had ever drawn to her. It didn't make any sense. Why would the guidance continue to make her suffer the presence of this non-believer? With a roar, the guide picked up the student and threw her at nowhere in particular. The student yelped as she tumbled across the ground, but did not seem to be injured by the throw. I don't really know what happened. The guide has had so many moments where it seemed like she was a good person, but at this point, even if she does have some sort of change of heart, it's all kind of terrible. So what is going on? Why is Stalingrad winning? I've never seen Stalingrad win ever. Oh well, I'm just going to ignore that. And all good things. I can tell what this is implying, unless it's some other saying that starts with all good things. After collecting the final ingredient, the guide and the student decided to take a boat back to Carthage rather than walk. The journey at sea was quiet for the most part, though toward the end of it had begun to rain. As the two took shelter in the small cabin, the student decided to open her mouth once more. What were you like before all of this? Lost without purpose, said the guide almost automatically. The teacher granted me what I needed most. The student looked away. Whether it was the rain that had wet her face or tears that glistened in the candlelight, the guide couldn't tell. There wasn't any joy in life before? None at all? Instead of answering, the guide changed topic. When we get back to Carthage, you will be executed if you do not abandon your vain beliefs. I know. The two sat quietly with only the pitter-patter of rain to keep them company. Eventually, the student took a deep breath and spoke again. If I'm going to die, then I'd like to know your name. I'm the guide. I always have been. I always will be. The guide said firmly. She saw tiredness or disappointment on the student's face. Didn't matter. Though student is just a moniker you have adopted out of spite. I can find your name in the records once we return. It was then that she saw anger begin to boil within the student. Why would you, though? You don't care about me. You don't care about anyone. You sacrificed your friends for a false promise from a fake religion led by a lying maniac. Elshat and Zethro died for nothing. Immediately, the guy drew a knife and pointed it at the student. You'll suffer for that. You just hurt people because you think you're better than them. I'm not scared of you anymore because I know that you'll never change. Not ever. The guide felt her own righteous fury begin to swell. Don't do it. Here's another one going to die. This won't be the first one that died by her own blade. Must come to an end. After the briefest hesitation, the guide threw herself at the student and gouged one of her eyes out with the knife. The student screamed and thrashed against the stronger zebra, trying desperately to push herself away long enough to flee. She wasn't near capable enough. She was merely a college student after all. The guide removed the bloodied knife from her eye socket and impaled her other eye. Feeling the surge of her coming kill flow through her, the guide took a moment to gloat. I've been looking forward to this ever so much, heretic. Every day you've tested my patience, belittled the true faith, and the guide felt a pressure build within her, a sudden, inexplicable feeling of the guidance. Somehow, now more than ever, it told her to spare this mare who spat in the face of everything she believed in. Her hoofs began to shake. She screamed in frustration. Why is she so important? The only answer she got was a faint whimpering from the student. The guide's head hurt. She couldn't take this. She couldn't stand it. She would not live another minute in the presence of this heretic, important or not. She yanked one of the student's wings open and viciously severed it with her knife, causing a series of pained gasps to come from the young mare. The guide then grabbed her other wing, dragged her out of the cabin, then threw her overboard. She turned around and went back inside, not bothering to see if she drowned. The guide took several deep breaths, trying to calm herself. She was free of judgment, wait, there was something missing. Her breath quickened. What was it? Her ingredients were all here, but her eyes widened. The guidance, she couldn't feel it anymore. The guidance was gone. And from such an end comes a new beginning. And the journey is finally complete. You can't really feel any sympathy at all for the guide. All of this, everything that happens is very much so her own fault. Anyways, we need some more steel. The simple things. And finally, they capitulate that this war was way too difficult. Now we can tear down the false idols, get an event, a punishment long due, finally fix our army and prepare it for a war that's going to be incredibly difficult, questionably possible. But anyways, that's all for today. I'll see you guys next time. Hopefully we'll be able to finally finish this once and for all. I'm scared.